Potentially one of the most tragic, but less well-known stories in all of Subnautica is that of the Sol transgov ship, the Mercury II. For those that don't know, Sol is one of the 3 colossal transgov organizations we know about in Subnautica that hold extensive and massive swaths of space under their regime, with the other 2 being Altera and the Mongolian independent states. The Solans, though, are a lot different than the other 2 trans governments, as they are characterized by their willingness to free themselves from the worldly desires of endless growth and productivity, and instead are pursuing what would make humanity best at all costs. This is exactly what the Mercury II's mission was, and why it was in the Ariadne Arms section of the galaxy. The ship was originally rendezvousing with a Mongolian mining interest on a separate planet and convinced them to implement a more harsh mining quota. So essentially, the crew of the Mercury II was an army of monk socialists who voted for Bernie, and one of their crew members was also an extremely talented and curious engineer named Elliot. When attempting to leave the system, the ship scanned planet 4546b and discovered ancient alien signatures, unbeknownst to the crew being the precursors. And Elliot was able to convince the captain of the ship, Diana, to stop and take a look at the chance they may find huge riches. But as the ship entered the zone of 4546b, the quarantine enforcement platform cannon shot at them immediately. But miraculously, the crew was able to dodge the original shot from the cannon by deploying all flares at once and also dumping their molten hot water contained in the nuclear reactor core of the engine. This large heat signature confused the quarantine enforcement platform and also showed that the precursor weapons work on heat signatures similar to human technology. Sadly though, the ship on landing needed to refuel and some of the engines were still damaged. So while the crew started to work on repairing the ship, Elliot was sent out to explore and eventually came across an alien SOS signal, which probably is the same signal the player finds from the alien architect Alan in Subnautica Below Zero. Soon after this though, multiple crew of the Mercury II were slaughtered by some of the sharks in the area. And even more horrifying, a portion of the crew had begun to contract Kara and were dying and spreading it to others. In a last-ditch effort to save the remaining crew, the ship captain Diana initiated an all-hands-on-deck evacuation, skipping engine check procedures and abandoning all crew infected with Kara with only 2 weeks of supplies. As expected though, as soon as the ship was in the air, the quarantine enforcement platform once again fired, but this time with a direct hit, which sent the ship flying into the ocean where we can find it in-game today, 30 to 100 years later. The last recording we have of the incident was actually a log Diana made of their final moments.
I heard the sound of metal tearing, and for a split second, everything was tinged bright green and unbearably hot. Then I saw daylight, and I was looking down at the ocean and ice. The strongest wind I've ever felt roared in my ears, ripping through the ship. People went flying out the side of the Mercury, so much screaming and chaos. I was lucky. I had just clipped into my seat anchor. Stephanos came out of nowhere, like a malaika, an angel. I felt his rough, calloused hand grasp mine with the gentlest of urgency. It felt like time slowed, he said. I gotcha. Just follow me, Ella. I don't know how, but he used an emergency tether to drag me to the nuclear reactor core, the strongest bulkhead in the ship. We hit the water and everything went black. He's sleeping. I think he might have hit his head. I'm exhausted. The adrenaline has long since worn off and my body aches. I think I might have fractured the rib. I'm gonna shut my eyes for a bit. When I wake up, I'll figure this out.
Where this theory gets really interesting, though, is the name of the actual ship. You see, in Roman mythology, Mercury, or Latin Mercurius, is the god of merchants, but also the god of thieves and tricksters. Could it be that the Mercury II always had a mission to explore planet 4546b? After all, their original mission seems like almost a waste of resources they used to get through so many phase gates from the Andromeda galaxy they hail from. This would imply that all major transgov organizations in-game have an interest in the precursor technology, and also would imply that a lot more people have an idea of what's going on 4546b than meets the eye. Maybe some large and powerful shadow governments and entities have a massive interest and stake in the planet that we don't know about, and the conspiracy of the precursors and their involvement with the Kara goes so much deeper than we could ever imagine. I certainly hope so, as it could be a great addition to a new game.